Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I've got the thumbs up that the live stream is on, so you're playing to a vast audience yet again across Nottinghamshire who will hold on to every word that you're saying, I'm sure. So, item number one on the agenda are the minutes of the last meeting, which was held on the 10th of January. Do I have your approval to sign them as a correct record? Thank you very much. Item number two, apologies for absence. I've got noted down apologies from Councillor Helen Ann Smith for medical reasons, and there is no substitute. And I've got an apology from Councillor Michael Payne, other reasons, and we are honoured to have the Leader of the Opposition standing in as a substitute for Councillor Michael Payne. So you've elevated us to an even higher level than we normally reside upon. So delighted to have you with us. Okay. Item number three, declarations of interest. I've been advised by the monitoring officer that I should declare an interest in item number 10, which is the Broxtowe Community Governance Review. And just by way of explanation, that means that the Broxtowe Borough Council are reviewing the boundaries of parish councils, or some of the parish councils within Broxtowe. And for my sins, I am chairman of Nuttall Parish Council, and we may well stand to gain vast sums of money in precept if the boundaries change in the right direction. But I'm not allowed to say that at this meeting. So the monitoring officer has told me I've got to leave when we get to that item. Councillor Fole, you want to declare an interest?
I just wanted to declare as well, because I'm a Broxtowe member too. If you could shift some of it, to Beeston, that would be good too.
You already take far too much of the resources in Broxtowe, but we won't have a Broxtowe argument here. We shall have that next Wednesday when it comes to the budget meeting, where I've got to put together an amended budget, an alternative budget. So yes, thank you. No more declarations of interest. Okay, can we move on to item number 4 then, which are the usual one, the local government ombudsman's decisions. And we have one adverse decision, which is in property, because we didn't respond quickly enough to a lady who wants to buy a small piece of land from us for a modest sum of money. And the Ombudsman has said we're very naughty and has awarded £200 has advised us to pay £200 for the distress that's being caused in not being able to buy this piece of property quickly enough. Is there anything from the complaints department that you wish to add to this, or
nothing, Chair?
Thank you. What about the property department? Have you?
Here to answer any questions. I think you've summarised. It's a piece of property that we bought under the threat of compulsory purchase for the Hook Town Centre Road scheme. And since then, the road scheme has been built. There's a piece of property which the complainant has had as garden extension for many years, which was part of the compulsory purchase, even though they didn't own it. Since the scheme's been finished, we've left with an area of public open space, effectively a grassed area, and that bit of garden land is unaffected, so they still wish to buy from us. We've gone back to the original owner, as we're required under the Critchell Down rules, who don't want to buy it, so we're now in negotiation with the complainant about the sale of that small piece of garden land to them.
Right, okay. I do resent, I have to say, the Ombudsman telling us what our maintenance regime should be. It's a matter for the council, whether you like it or not, the maintenance regime. But there we are. Any comments, questions? Councillor Fole.
Just a quick one, and forgive me for perhaps teaching you such but I suppose deciding not to investigate further doesn't mean you can't learn lessons from this. I mean, the one that jumped out at me was the was the path, and I understand that the Ombudsman have a kind of set series of criteria to go through, but certainly paths, the Weirfield path in Beeston's completely washed away. Paths is something that actually crops up again and again and again in my casework. So I suppose the thing is, although these are Ombudsman decisions, and I know which kind of fill a very particular kind of part of the agenda, I think there's learning from this that perhaps we should be picking up, even if the Ombudsman has found no fault.
Yeah, thank you for that. We always learn lessons and try and implement the learning at the earliest possible opportunity. Particularly, we've learned to challenge the Ombudsman's decision much more robustly in its draft form, and we're seeing some dividends from that as well. If there are no further comments or questions, I will move the recommendation set out on page 9.
For a second.
Thank you. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. We're moving on now to the next item on the agenda, which is a related item, but it's a 6-monthly report, the response to the Ombudsman's decisions regarding, in particular, educational health and care plans. And you've got a report there from the Service Director for Education, Learning and Inclusion, who is with us this morning. Is there anything you feel you need to add to this, or are you just happy to take listen to comments and take questions?
A bit of both, actually. Chair,
Good, well, go for it
I'm
then.
More than happy to take comments and questions. I think that'd be really helpful. Just reflecting on my journey with the Governance and Ethics Committee, I think I was first here in the Governance and Ethics Committee 17 months ago, when I arrived in Nottinghamshire County Council as the Service Director for Education, Learning and Inclusion. And there was an item on that meeting around education, health and care plan timelines. And we were doing a lot of work was already underway around that. Just for context, at the point of that meeting, we were sitting at 1.7% of our assessments within the statutory timescale. We were receiving about 87 requests a month. In fact, the month of that meeting, we had 87 new assessment requests coming in. And we had a sizable waiting list in terms of assessment requests. That waiting list does continue, although positive movement has been made with regards to that. Moving forward 17 months, that 87 requests being received a month is now 165 to 170 requests for assessment a month. That demand rise of 100% just in that 17 months. And that's a demand rise that's increased year on year for a number of years. We were at 1.7% in timescale, definitely not good enough. We're now at 28.6% of our assessment requests being delivered within timescale. That's a significant improvement from where we were 17 months ago. There is a long way to go. Nottinghamshire is making gains in this area. It's investing. In fact, we've invested £1.6 million in both locum capacity for education psychologists and in service staff to support and manage our needs in this area of education, health and care requests. We've got a really, really committed workforce that want the best for children and families. It is paying dividends. We are seeing improvements, and it's an onward journey. Nationally, of course, 50% still, over 50% of all education, health and care assessment requests nationally are out of timescale. It's a very, very damaged system. It's a challenge system across the entire United Kingdom, as well as in Nottinghamshire. So we're doing all we can, but we're doing it in a context that is extremely challenging. It's a systemic issue across the UK, and we are taking action in Nottinghamshire. We are seeing improvements, and we will continue to do so. That still remains the fact that our timescales are not at national. We're on a trajectory to be there, and we will continue beyond that, because actually it's not about meeting the same expectations as others. It's actually about every family, every child and young person having the needs assessed and met at the earliest possible stage, getting the support that they need. That's what we want. That's what we're working towards. We can take questions around waiting lists and other things, but I think just to say that at one point last year, before our additional investment, the predicted wait time for an EP assessment as part of this process was about 12 months for the longest wait. That's currently the longest anyone would make is 5 months. And that additional capacity is paying off. We're still seeing those increased requests. We will still have more challenge coming to this committee, more complaints coming to this committee, as we'll see nationally. But our interest here is in making the improvements we need to make getting our staff into the work they need to do with children and families, and getting the right assessment and support for those that need it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. McConaughey. Any comments or questions? Councillor Fold.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for that. And yes, I'm pleased to see there's progress being made. It needs it. I think one of another kind of interest I probably should have declared. I am now the County Council Network spokesperson on this, which I think, as you know, so this is something that I'm kind of becoming very interested in trying to kind of understand a bit better. But I think it's clear, and this isn't a party political comment at all. The SND process, it's absolutely broken, isn't it? I think everybody involved accepts that, right, kind of cross-party. So I think that's something that it needs kind of tackling. It needs tackling at kind of root cause, really. I think, anyway, we can talk about that another time. But it is still a little bit concerning, isn't it? My understanding is that actually we're still at half the national average in terms of EHCP plans, which is still pretty shocking, isn't it? And I guess if you do a little bit of a sum, if 4.5% of ECP plans were issued in 20 weeks, that leaves 95.5% who didn't receive an EHCP plan. And I would like to know in numerical terms how many families, if you have that information, how many families that is, and actually what the backlog is, because again there's reference here to 1,368 EHC requests. How many of those are new? How many of those have kind of been around for a long time? It's good that the time scale for assessing them is coming down. That's great. But how many people are still waiting several months? Because 5 months is much better than a year. Well done for that. Thanks for your work on that. But 5 months is an awful long time if you have a child, isn't it? It's kind of SEND, as I'm sure you kind of know. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll leave it. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have those figures immediately available, or do you need to provide a written answer?
So we'll need to provide some written information around the numbers of children who do not receive an education healthcare plan through the process. We can get that to you. Just in terms of that waiting list, and again, yes, I completely agree with the comments that you've made around the challenge in the system, and people still wait too long. Of course they do, and we're seeking to address that. The waiting list for EP assessments has reduced from 488 in September of last year to 338 currently. So it's showing that decline for the first time in a long time. Actually, we've been able to provide the additional capacity to bring that waiting list down. That's a positive move. But in the face of that continued increased demand, the challenge continues.
Anything further? Yes, Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just say that, in my opinion, this authority seems to be improving its responses and service delivery. But I think cross-party we agree that nationally the system probably needs some reform. Could I just ask Councillor Fowler? I didn't quite catch it, but did you say you were the Nottinghamshire's representative? Do you feed back to a national organisation about the system?
No. I probably do that, but my role is spokesperson for the County Councils Network. It's a non-party political kind of spokesperson. There's a range of spokespeople, as you can imagine, and I've just been nominated for that. So I'm getting regular briefings. So I'm hoping that will be helpful to everybody. Certainly, because I don't see it as a party political post. In fact, absolutely not. But and actually, there is going to be a report coming out from the County Council Network about SEND and what we might be able to do to make it better. So, and that's in progress at the moment. Yeah.
I'm sure the department will look forward to receiving that report. Okay, Councillor Lee, you wanted to comment.
Chairman, I appreciate that. I was at the CCA this weekend where I got to speak with councillors from across the country, and it feels that every single one of us is having the shortfall at the moment because it's just not the people doing the job. What do you think will be the next 2-3 years? Is there a plan of getting more people in? Are we outbidding? Are we competing? How's it working?
So if I start, and then it might be that our principal education psychologist wants to add into this, but we know that it's a marketplace in terms of educational psychologists, that just the capacity isn't there. I think there's only 200 trained each year, and we've taken steps to increase our internal provision. We're also putting an additional investment into locum educational psychology capacity. That came on stream in November, and that's contributed significantly to some of the improvements that we've been able to make through expanding our own network. we're continuing to see what more we can do in that area. It's an ongoing challenge. I think, interestingly, there was a study, EP workforce study that took place a couple of years ago, where 91% of local authorities surveyed didn't have the capacity to meet the demand. So I think it's positive what we are doing, and the more we can do, we will. But we need to be able to access a workforce that's simply not there, and there's dangers in terms of the cost of that provision. So with significant investment I've already referred to that we've put in as a local authority to address this, and it's sustaining that level of investment and more becomes even more challenging. So it needs system reform as well as the work that we're undertaking as a local authority. Or I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Hello. I would just say it's really welcomed this council's investment in our educational psychology service, both the short-term investment in locum assessments to look at the waiting list, but also the thinking longer term and giving us the permission to recruit over time. So we do have permission to recruit 9 full-time EPs over the next 3 years. And what we're trying to do is to recruit them while they're training. So to offer them, pending their qualification, a post. So we've already recruited 3 full-time EPs who will start when they finish their training, and 1 other qualified EP who'll be joining us in September. And we're planning another round of recruitment in the summer. So I think that's really wise from this council to invest in the short-term plan and the long-term plan, because the short-term plan, the cost of locum agency staff is not sustainable financially. And actually, if we can recruit people who want to work in Nottinghamshire, who want to work across the wide range of educational psychology work, which includes early intervention work in our schools, which we know our schools really value, and they tell us, I think that's a longer-term sustainable solution. And I think we are doing quite well within our local and national colleagues in terms of staff retention and recruitment.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Henry.
Yes, thanks. Thank you for that answer. I was going to ask a question around resources, but you've answered that bit. The bit I'm looking at is paragraph 9 on page 21. It seems our target for the year ending at December 23 appears to have been 30%. My question is, why isn't the improvement targeted at 47.8% as a minimum?
Right. Who's picking that one up?
So if I could just come in on that, is that okay? So the trajectory for improvement and the timescales were based upon the starting point and reaching national average in a time that was ambitious and agreed with the Department for Education. So we're monitored by the Department for Education. We report our performance in this area on a monthly basis. We're also subject to regular scrutiny of our education healthcare plan timescales with the Department for Education, but through a support and challenge process as part of the SEND improvement work. And that's where the trajectory has come from and been agreed to show that continued improvement.
Thank you for that. Councillor Barnfather.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I'm a sort of a glass half full guy rather than a glass half empty. So I like to I like to see a direction of travel, and I think it's very easy to be critical of the department and critical of the authority. But we've heard some of the statistics, 100% increase in demand over a 17-month period, which has not been met by 100% increase in availability of trained educational psychologists, or 100% increase in national funding to support local authorities in delivering on their statutory responsibilities. So we've gone from 4.5% in 2022, of plans being completed within 140 days, to 28% in 2023. Now that's a significant increase, and I'm aware, because I obviously read other papers that go to cabinet members, of the fact that we are not only taking on locums to deliver additional consultancy supplies to us effectively of trained psychologists. We're training in-house. We're appointing trained full-time staff, as already been alluded to, that hopefully will remain with Nottinghamshire and provide a continuing improved service as we move forward. We've invested significant additional funding into it. the reality of it is you cannot overnight turn the ship around. What you have to do is to have a consistent approach to it, a consistent direction of travel. I think the statistics that we've got before us prove that. And whilst in an ideal world, every child would receive their ECHP within the allocated time, that is quite simply not feasible physically. It's not feasible financially at this moment in time. But we are, I think, again, some of the statistics in terms of the time that people are waiting now, 12 months down to 5 months. We've heard the statistics. The direction of travel is good. We recognise there's a lot of work to be done. Officers are doing their best with it within the constraints that they have. So let's recognise what we are achieving rather than just being critical of what we're unable to achieve at this moment in time.
Thank you for that, Councillor Barnfield. Councillor Deakin.
Thank you, Chair. I agree. I think that the praise ought to be with the staff for the hard work that they've done in order to bring the timescales and the wait list down to begin with. I'm looking at it slightly in a different manner. So my daughter's just gone off to university. She's doing early years. So, and it's a course that can take her down all these different avenues and to a social work and stuff. But this isn't a word that's ever come up from her at university about going down the education psychology service route. And I'm just thinking, while we've got people who are sat on the county network and with connections to government, that actually, rather than it being our issue, it's obviously a national issue. Let's raise it up a bit. Let's be getting into those universities and talking to, because she don't know where she wants to be, but let's make this an option. Let's talk about it more, like we did with the nurses and the midwives when we were having a lot of trouble there. That became a big national recruitment to try and get people into this service, and we want to value our children. So let's use our influence on a national level rather than just at our level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. In a way, that's what we are doing by raising it at this meeting and getting these sort of reports, so that the problems are out there in the public domain. But Councillor Fowler has told us she represents the county council on the network, so that's one avenue where we complain. You look can be raised. You looked at me when you said inroads into government. I don't think I don't really think I have. Otherwise, things would be very different if I have. But we won't go there. So yeah, I think you're quite right. Very quickly, then, yes, come back. Yes.
Just to say, training for teachers on this is actually on the County Council Network's agenda, absolutely. As is a lot more, but I won't go into detail now. But the report should be out quite soon, so we can all have a look.
Good. Well, thank you very much for that, and I think that's been a useful discussion, and it's good to see the progress that's being made. And I think you're quite right to get into the universities. We are in a strong position here to get into the universities and grab the training students before anybody else can grab them, and outline the benefits of working for Nottinghamshire. But I do think also that in the interim period, government, Department for Education, who love to be so critical of us, they need to take a lead. I think they need to revisit the 20-week period, whether that is realistic in the current climate. I think they also need to look at the threshold for applying for an EHC plan, whether that is realistic in the current climate. And perhaps you could confirm or deny if I've got it wrong, but my understanding is that in Nottinghamshire, it's always been the case that those children that need the support can get that support without resorting to an EHC plan. And what I'm concerned about going forward with the numbers that we've seen, where clearly, even if we hit the national average target, there are going to be a significant number who are not seen or not dealt with within the statutory time period. That if we can keep getting Ombudsman's awards against us, this county council and other councils are going to be hemorrhaging money because we're having to pay out, and through no fault of our own. Could you confirm whether or not I'm right in the point that I've made, or not?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in fact, I met with the Department for Education last week and was very clear in our concern around the national systemic issues here and the fact that the 20-week statutory timescale was set back in 2014 when, within Nottinghamshire, the number of statements of additional needs, of special educational needs at that point was I've not got the figure to hand, but it was significantly below 1,000. It was low, and we're now, well over 4,000. So it doesn't take into account that rise in demand. I think it's been raised through the SEND and AP improvement plan that the Department for Education have published as a sort of question back to the department of will that be addressed, and it's not. There's no confirmation that that is likely to be addressed in the immediate future, but that remains a challenge. The threshold set within the Code of Practice is significantly low, as in an assessment should take place if there may be any additional need that requires support, maybe. So it's a very, very low threshold. And when we have these complaints and the Ombudsman complaints, the funding that takes comes right out of our revenue pot that we would want to be using to address and provide additional support for our children and families. You're absolutely right that in Nottinghamshire you do not need an education, health and care plan to access support. Actually, most children and young people are in an education setting, and that's where you access the best support. Education settings are well placed to have a holistic support, including health and care providers as well as education specialists. We make sure that our high needs block funding is available to schools through structures that are in place, and we've got different structures of family and district SENCOs to support groups of schools, and there's a significant work taking place at the moment to further strengthen that system. We want to ensure that parents and carers are confident that working with their schools, working with their education settings from early years through, they can have their needs identified and met at the most local level to where they are, rather than going through a process which ultimately does get you an education, health and care plan. You need that if you're going to a specialist provision. You do not need that to have your needs met in a mainstream environment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and I think that's the message we need to get out as well. Thank you very much. Well, I think we've had a good discussion on that. I'm going to move the recommendations here that are set out on page 24, and you'll note, Councillor Deakin, that we're asking for a further report back in 12 months so we can highlight it again. And I'm sure when we come back in 12 months' time, we shall have had no further Ombudsman's findings against us, and every plan will have been dealt with in the 20-week time scale. But then. I'm always an optimist.
I'm going to second that.
Thank you. Reports be moved and seconded. All those in favour? And that's unanimous. Thank you very much. Right, moving on from the sublime to the ridiculous. We're now going on to the external audit and the audit finding reports. Not for this current year, of course. For the last year, just in case anybody is getting excited that we got ahead of ourselves, 2022-23, and we've got a recommendation there which I'm going to move, and we do have a representative from Grant Thornton who I'm delighted to see joining us this morning. Is there anything you'd like to add to the report? An unqualified report, isn't it?
Yes, it is, Chair. So just a quick introduction. I will ask that the audit manager just comment on some of the more detailed findings, but just in terms of what you've got before you, you've got the audit findings report for both the pension fund and the county council here. The pension fund audit was largely completed by the end of September, and we actually issued what we refer to the pension assurances to the district council auditors in October. So that audit's been completed for quite some time. The county audit was substantially complete by the end of December. It was just unfortunate with the timing of the committees that it's actually come to this meeting today. In terms of the overall findings, as the chair referred to, they are both unqualified opinions on both the pension fund and the county council accounts, which is obviously a good result. Just very quickly on the pension fund audit, before I pass over to Zach, there were a couple of non-material issues that we identified as part of the audit, but I don't think they should be of concern to members. One related to just simply movements in valuations around investments. Obviously, the pension fund has to prepare its draft accounts by the end of May, we get more up-to-date information on the valuation at the 31st of March. And really, whilst 12 million does sound like a big figure in the context of the pension fund, it isn't actually material. And then the other one was simply just an issue that should have been recognised in the prior year in 21-22, but had been accounted for in 22-23. So essentially, it was just accounted for in the wrong year. So they're not issues that I would necessarily say are of concern, mainly due to the fact that they were non-material. But I will just pass off to Zach just to kind of go into a bit more detail on the currency audit in terms of the recommendations and some of the adjustments, the unadjusted errors that we found as part of the audit.
Thank you. So we worked to a materiality level of 20.96 million, a county council audit, so just under 21 million. We didn't find any errors either individually or cumulatively in that region, in excess of that. But we are required in our audit findings report to report to you any errors above a trivial level, which we set at £1 million. So on page 40 of the report, you'll see that we've listed 5 errors that we noted. 3 of them are in relation to investment property valuations, and 2 of those are just kind of human error, manual error, not significant values. And the other one is a classification issue where we think it should be a land asset rather than an investment property asset. The other 2 out of the 5, one was a grant income error, and the other one is a pension fund error, and that's the biggest one of 3.5 million, and that stems from the pension fund audit. The significant risks in the audit, which we reported to you in our audit plan, there were 3, and we have to report to you against those regarding the work we've done and any findings on those. So the first one was management override of controls. We tested high-risk journals, and we looked at management's material accounting estimates, and we didn't have anything to report on either of those areas. The second significant risk was the valuation of the council's property. We used our own independent valuations expert to assist us in our audit testing, and the only findings to report to you with regards to that is 3 investment property errors that I've already mentioned, which is on page 40 of the AFR. The third and final risk was relating to the valuation of the pensions liability. Again, we use our own independent expert to assist us with testing. There were some disclosure errors in the accounts in the initial draft, which management have adjusted for, and the 3.5 million error, which is unadjusted, which I referred to just now. Some further issues to report to you. If page 35 through to 39, you'll see that there's a number of disclosure issues. Some of these crop up year on year. They're not something we would not issue a clean opinion for, but we do recommend that you adjust for those in future. There's an issue on page 22 with regards to related parties disclosures. There are weaknesses here that do need to be addressed. So we've found for a couple of years now that there are company interests that councillors have that aren't being declared. So when the finance team come to pull together the related parties note in the accounts, they're not aware of those company interests. We find them through companies' house checks, so there are improvements to be made in the declaration of interest process.
For the sake of time, could you just unpack that a little bit? You're saying that members are, if I've heard you correctly, and I may not, then members are not declaring interest when they should. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. So one of the checks that we do, we go through Companies House to look for any potential directorships held by both officers and members, and then we compare that to the interests that have been declared in the Register of Interest. If we do identify some directorships that are not declared, then obviously we report these back to you, and that is the recommendation. So yes, there are some directorships that haven't been declared.
So would these be directorships, technically directorships, as a result of members being appointed as representatives on what I would call outside bodies, or not?
Yes, not in all cases.
Not in all cases. Right, thank you.
Sorry, so would it be helpful to have that list so we could look at that? Is it in here somewhere?
Yes, we can furnish you with the
Yeah.
detail.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful.
Democratic Services are aware and have been chasing some colleagues for finishing their declarations.
So obviously, given the legal importance of declaring an interest, we need to follow that up and close that out for other reasons, don't we?
Thank you. There was another finding with regards to related parties, in that we found that the finance team hadn't done a full interrogation of the ledger for related party transactions. So further work was needed, and we did manage to satisfy ourselves in the end that the related parties note was complete. We also performed a detailed review of the council's IT controls. We used specialist IT auditors to conduct that work. We had a number of findings. They're set out on pages 17 to 21, with deficiencies with regard to some controls. There was one significant deficiency noted, and we are satisfied that management have actioned the recommendations on that one. For the other deficiencies, management comments are in the report itself, but we're assured that implementation is going ahead to address those as well. Finally, in Appendix B, it's our action plan, and that sets out the recommendations that we've got for management following our audit. It does touch on some prior audit recommendations that haven't been implemented, so just to note that there are some that have been rolled forwards as well. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Are there any serious issues as far as recommendations that haven't been implemented?
We regard them all to be serious. With regards to the significant deficiencies, the only one that came out was the IT issue that I referenced that has been addressed already. So there are different levels of reporting there. Significant ones, we're satisfied that you're addressing them, and the remainder are to be addressed.
Okay, thank you. Yes, sorry, you want to come back?
And so, just to wrap up, just to give an acknowledgement to the finance team, obviously they do not just produce the draft accounts on time, and they've obviously produced a good quality set of accounts given the nature of our opinion. But obviously they then do furnish us with a lot of information and respond to a lot of queries throughout the entire audit. So I do want to just express my thanks formally in this meeting to the finance team.
Yes, indeed, and I think Councillor Barnfather, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Just for our wide audience out there that are listening to this, who will have heard that term, unqualified opinion, perhaps we should just qualify that to say that doesn't mean that our auditors don't have 3 O-levels or GCSEs between them. They are fully qualified auditors, and their unqualified opinion is the fact that they find no material deficiencies in the accounts as presented to them and examined by them. And when you consider, again, we've talked about figures of 21 million being material, of 1 million being reportable, and people would be thinking, well, £1 million is a huge amount of money in my life. But you have to put that in the context of a budget that's 550 million revenue budget, a capital budget, the fact that we handle central government grants. So a total budget of something like £1.2 billion. That's why, obviously, you don't work on figures of £1,000 or 5,000 or £10,000. So, for anybody who is listening in here, this is a good audit finding that says that the county council are managing their finances well. I'm not going to reference some of the comments in the report itself, which actually say that we have good financial controls and we have a sustainable financial system in place. Thank you, Chairman.
Indeed, and like you, Councillor Barnfather, when I hear the word unqualified, I was always balk at it and think, what does that really mean? So I don't know what your O-levels were, Mr. Stevenson. Sports science, perhaps, or domestic science, and so he is well qualified as far as that's concerned. Right, I think Councillor Henry, you wanted to comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm looking at page 68, the related parties one. And was thinking of, in the interest of transparency, Chair, in the related parties bit there, the question I would want to ask is which charitable trust and which member, where has this information been disclosed? And then there's a second bit on that, which is the bit around specific revenue grants. A little bit more information, Nigel and Andrew, about that. It's a bit just left like that, so it seems a little bit more information, or to explain that a little bit more would be helpful.
Are you able to supply that now, or do you want to give a written?
I prefer, because it's quite sensitive in terms of nature, in terms of be naming a particular member in a particular charity, that I think it would probably be inappropriate to state that in a public domain. But I'm happy to provide that info to you, Councillor Henry and committee members. As regards the specific grant, it's about information in a note. In terms of, it was one grant that was put in the wrong category in a note. Yeah, not that it was revenue grant that was missed, just its category in a note.
Okay with that, Councillor Fold?
Just a very quick one. Just again, in terms of reassurance, is it probably worth saying that the smaller amounts of money that Councillor Barnfather referred to, that they would be subject to internal audit, wouldn't they? I mean, if the much missed Rob Disney was here, he would be saying something like that, wouldn't he? So I just thought, it's not that they're not audited; it's just that they're audited at a different level, but they are audited internally. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yes, and again, I'm grateful for Councillor Barnfather's comments, as for the chairman's as well. I will do better with my qualifications.
Right, good.
But you're absolutely right. In terms of internal audit, we'll go down to the nth detail in terms of those controls and process, down to the penny. But it's about the set of accounts, and quite rightly, as Councillor Barnfather says, it is practice. It is what you'll find on all private sector as it is in public sector accounts. There's a level of materiality in terms of, otherwise the auditors will be here for 3 or 4 years, trying to get down to every penny.
And you will see, Councillor Fold, later on the agenda there is a report on internal audit as well, where most of the opinions are either substantial or reasonable. Councillor Upton.
Thank you, Chairman. Section D, audit adjustments, page 40. The preamble implies that I, as a member of this committee, have got to approve the items in that table. And it's just really a point of clarification. I'm no longer on the pensions committee, so no doubt those members would know the answer. But on that item of 3.5 million or thereabouts, quite a large item, it's listed there, pension assets overstated, etc. Is that assets overstated or overvalued? It's just a bit of clarification, if that's possible.
Effectively, it's overstated, overvalued is effectively the same thing. So at the year end, the pension fund will value its pension assets in its account. I think this was the pooled investment vehicle, and they obviously do that valuation at a point in time based upon the best information that they have at the time. Obviously, the audit does take place in the months afterwards, where we get more up-to-date valuation information at the 31st of March. That information implied that this particular investment had been overvalued in the draft accounts by 12 million, and the council's share of that is 3.5 million.
If I may, Roger, come back and say that, not to bleed into another report on the committee, but the delays in starting an audit, we have still met our statutory requirements, as we always will be under my guidance, by the 31st of May, publishing our accounts. As a consequence of that, there will be estimates. Just as it is in terms of accruals. If the audit used to start in the summer, they will have no better information than we would, and this will therefore not be an issue. The longer time frame it takes to do an audit, absolutely, they will have better information, because you move away from an estimate to an actual known fact, and that's what causes some of the issues. As a consequence of, in theory then, the longer a delay in starting an audit, the more likely the accounts will be wrong and misstated.
Thank you very much for that. Makes the auditors look better then, doesn't it, that they found things? Perhaps there's a hidden agenda there in the delays. Right. I'm going to move the recommendation, and subject to the response, it's going to be a written response to Councillor Henry. Are we going to have a seconder?
Second.
All those in favour? Sorry? Yes. Yeah. All those in favour? Thank you very much. That's carried. The next item on the agenda is which page are we? We've got to it yet. Thank you very much for that, sir.
There's a lot to flick through.
Is the external audit report 22-23, and you've got the report set out in front of you. I move the recommendations.
Chairman, second.
Any comments or questions?
So just to explain the difference on this report, this report largely concentrates on our value for money work, and so it's our commentary upon the arrangements that the county council and the pension fund have in place to secure best value. As in previous years, this concentrates on three thematic areas: financial sustainability, governance, and then the last one is improving economy, efficiency and effectiveness. As you can see on page 121 of the pack, our assessment is very positive. We haven't identified any areas of significant weakness across any of the three themes, and we have only raised one new improvement recommendation, and that actually links back to the previous agenda item around send improvement, and our recommendation is just naturally recognising the improvement journey that the county council is on that particular area, although we do recognise that new investment has gone in place and those arrangements and that investment is actually proving to pay off, as we saw in the last item. So this is a very positive report, and on that basis I'm just more than happy to take questions on any of the detail in the report, Chair.
Thank you very much for that. Any comments or questions, or are you happy just to accept the report? It's been moved and seconded. No comments or questions. All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. That's carried. Right. Item number 8. Local audit delays. And there's a report in front of you about something we know a lot about on this committee because we've experienced it year on year. And you see that there are some proposals to clear the backlog. Yes, and you're asked to give approval to the Section 151 officer in conjunction with myself to respond to the local audit backlog consultation. So I'm going to move those recommendations.
Chairman, I second.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Bonfather.
Just a confirmation from the 151 officer that when we're talking about delays, there are no delays from this authority as such.
Yeah, I can confirm there's no delays. I'm hoping that by the end of this week, our accounts for 22-23 will be complete. From external auditor, a nice nod from an external auditor. But there are implications for us going forward because of delays elsewhere in the system, which would mean then that our accounts for 23-24, that we have all of those issues as responded to earlier, Roger, about the potential for them to start audits later, and therefore there will be issues, as is in the sector in terms of finding external auditors of a suitable qualified nature to do the accounts, as well as all of the known issues that are out there in terms of local authorities that are failing in terms of producing accounts, and some that haven't produced accounts for 3 or 4 years. The issue we're going to have, of course, is the document from DLUC is pointing at local authorities with their responsibilities, and I'll be wanting to make sure that there's some responsibilities on external auditors as well, because it's an obligation on them to complete the audit within a reasonable time frame. And you'll be pleased to know that I'm feeding into the response for the LGA in part of this process. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, thank you for that. We've all submitted our accounts on time, and we haven't delayed at all. We're financially very strong, very sound, very robust, and the reports today simply confirm that. And I think that's got to be a reassuring message for the residents of Nottinghamshire out there, very much so. If there are no further comments on the local audit delays, the report's been moved and seconded. All those in favour? Thank you very much. No one against. The next one is item number 9, the internal audit, term 2 progress 23-24 and term 1 plan 24-25. And those are set out in front of you. And there's a recommendation on page 161, which is a noting of the work. So, are there any comments or questions on the internal audit plan and the progress that's been made in the previous quarter? No? If not, are you happy to note the report? Thank you very much. The next item on the agenda, I've got to go, but I'll be back.
Well, I've been left in the hot seat. Item number 10, 167 to 174. We have recommendations on page 170 that the Chief Executive be authorised to submit a letter at Appendix A to report as a courtesy response to the consultation on Broxtowe Borough Council draft proposals, reversing its position on any formal responses until phase 2 of the consultation. I'm going to propose that from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Turner. I'm going to take it as read. Any comments?
Yeah, just very briefly, Chairman, that this is a response that we drafted a couple of years ago in conjunction with the administration and officers as our standard response, where at this moment in time there is insufficient detail effectively for us to be able to make informed comments. So we reserve our option to do so at a later stage.
I appreciate that, Councillor. Madam Farber, any more comments? Put it to the vote. All in favour? Carried unanimously. The chairman back to his seat to save me.
The last item, you've abolished it. Oh.
I enhanced the size of it. He voted to
The work programme, which is item 11. The work programme has been set out in front of you, and you are asked to consider whether any changes are required. All seems a bit of a daft recommendation, but still, I think we ought to note the work programme. Okay. Oh, a change coming up.
Change coming up. So I've just noticed the review of arm's length organisations is still on the work programme for April. We're going to bring that back in the autumn, and sorry, it's my fault. I just haven't updated the work programme. So if you're okay for me to make that amendment.
Yep. Everybody happy with that? We do need that review.
Yeah.
Okay, with that amendment, are you happy to accept the work programme? Yep. Thank you very much. And that brings to close at 11:24, a particularly long meeting this morning. So thank you very much for your patience and endurance.